One of the things that that worked out really well with having these guys, the other guys, earlier this morning is James talked a bit about why you want to go public and some of the pitfalls, some of the pros and cons. Are you ready? And then James Monroe went into a little bit more detail about that, which was fantastic. He talked about the cheap shares and the kind of things that could affect an exchange listing, and even the benefits of an IPO versus an RTO, and vice versa, because there's some positive things about both. Well, the way you get to that stage will definitely affect what happens when you get to the exchange, when we get to the listing process. So James already introduced me. I've been in charge of the listings department since we launched back in 2003. We're a fairly small group, so all of the listings that we've done have all come through the same group of people and the same listings committee for our entire history. So we've seen what works and what doesn't work. We've seen companies come to us too early and fail. And we've seen companies come to us at just the right stage and really grow and prosper. And I think a big part of that is you have to think about why you're actually coming to the exchange. It shouldn't be your end goal. It shouldn't be your ultimate desire just to get a listed company. It's simply a milestone in the growth of your company. And if you're not quite ready for it, it's not going to go as well as you planned. It's better to take a little bit extra time, grow the company a little bit more before you jump into that listing stage. So we'll talk a bit about these things. We did recently update the policies based on the experience that we've had over the last several years, where we saw the companies that were underfunded, or their business plan wasn't quite up to snuff. And I think James mentioned that earlier this morning too, that your business plan has to be well developed enough that it's going to pass a listing review. That's not the only thing. It has to be well developed enough that it's got a good chance of being successful. So we've raised the bar a little bit. We expect the companies to be a little bit more well-funded and a little bit more prepared for the process of being listed, and for the status being listed on a stock exchange. What we don't encourage is we set very specific thresholds for what a company has to meet. Somebody asked earlier about the number of shareholders, and James talked earlier about the number of seed shares and cheap shares. When we set restrictions on those, or we set limits on those things, we're not setting a blueprint for what a listed company should look like. We're setting minimum standards, things that we would look at, measurable things that we would look at to see that a company has made it far enough in their development to be ready to be listed. It's not meant to say if you meet exactly each one of these requirements, you're a perfect candidate for listing. You may not be. In fact, if you meet all of the minimum thresholds, you're probably not ready for listing yet. But each of those minimum thresholds is there to give us a guideline of where the company should be when they're ready to list. So there are a couple of things. Again, James touched on these this morning. You have to be a reporting issuer to qualify for listing, and going through the IPO process or the RTO process that James talked about earlier will make you a reporting issuer. On the venture exchange, they have a program called the CPC program, the Capital Pool Company program. And the way that works, James talked about the RTO process earlier. The CPC is a shell that's created just for the purpose of doing an RTO with another company. So you would get your company ready to the stage where you think it's ready to list, but you don't have enough shareholders and you're not a reporting issuer. There's this CPC program where you can do the reverse takeover with that CPC. It's all they're designed for. We don't have a program like that. You're going through the process, that company's going through the process twice, the CPC program, double the audit fees, double the legal fees. And if the people running that CPC have already paid the legal fees and the audit fees and the listing fees to get that thing listed, and then you're going to do a transaction with that company, they want all of that back. So as James mentioned earlier, you can do they call it a qualifying transaction with that capital pool company, but you're not getting to control the whole company. As James said perfectly, I think it's not your company. So ideally, we'd see people grow and get to this stage. I mean, when you think about the dream of growing your company and taking it public, you're thinking of the traditional IPO route. So we don't have that shell program. And then to become a reporting issuer, you've got a couple of options. If you file a prospectus in any of the jurisdictions in Canada, you become a reporting issuer in that jurisdiction. And that's what we need to be able to list you. So you can file an offering prospectus, you'll have an agent acting as an underwriter, and we'll talk about some financing after this. Or you can file a non-offering prospectus. You may have been well funded already privately. You look at the exchange listing requirements, you're ready for all of that. You can file a non-offering prospectus simply to reach that stage of being a reporting issuer, and then we can list you. So those are the different ways you can come to us. And here's some of the basic things. Now remember, I said these are sort of the basic guidelines, basic thresholds that we use to determine whether or not you're ready to be a listed company. And we don't set high thresholds. They're there to make sure that the company has some activity or has a reasonable plan and is well enough funded to put that plan into operation. So we're not trying to discourage companies from coming. We are here so that companies could come at an earlier stage than they traditionally would by going to the venture exchange or the CSE, for example. So we're here for that earlier stage, but we still need to make sure that the company's ready to move forward. If they're already operating, already have revenues, that's a great first step as far as meeting financial requirements. If it's been recently listed, which is a little different than what we're talking about in going public, but if a company's already listed on another exchange, it makes it easier for us to move it over. $200,000 in working capital. That's the minimum. And we've raised this recently. It used to be $100,000. We've raised it to $200,000 because we saw too many companies fail, even within a year of launching. And the $200,000 is an absolute minimum. When you prepare a listing statement or a prospectus and we look at your objectives for the next 12 months, those objectives, getting listed, going public, those objectives don't count. We're looking at the business objectives. Whatever your plan says, whatever objectives and milestones you believe you need to meet in the next 12 months to pursue that plan, we want them to be well funded. So if you tell us you need $470,000 over the next 12 months, that's your minimum working capital. We just stuck in the $200,000 so that we wouldn't get people coming to us with a plan that said they needed $107,000. We've already seen those ones fail. So the minimum $200,000, but it's really what you actually need. It's not us being subjective and applying our discretion or applying our judgment on what you need. It's from your own disclosure. You said, I need $478,000 to implement this plan, then you're going to have that $478,000. Okay? But we will consider other, when we say financial resources, if you are generating a little bit of revenue and you have some working capital and you almost meet the minimum and then you have a great credit facility or something like that, that works. Okay? We're not trying to set a bar where if you come in here, you don't qualify. We're trying to set a bar that says if you're around this and it looks like it's going to work, then we're going to take it. We're here to help, not turn the companies away. I'm stuck. Is that my last slide?
You're done.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks. I've been waiting for you 12 years for you to say that to me. Okay, James talked about the cheap shares. Anything at, no, sorry, the 2 cent shares, cheap, anything less than 2 cents is a builder's shares. You may have heard what James referred to them as seed shares earlier. Other exchanges call them founder's shares. We call them builder's shares. They were the shares where the shareholders came in early, put in the money to get the thing started. Okay, there's a difference between setting up a structure where this group of shareholders gets cheap shares at 1/2 cent, then this group of shareholders gets shares at 2 cents, then these guys get shares at 5 cents, and you do that all in a matter of a week. Okay, that shows nothing of the growth of the company. When we're looking at a company prior to listing, we're looking at the organic growth. Either that or it was an overnight success. Somebody put in a bunch of money, got it started, and 3 weeks later, other guys piled in and said, yeah, we'll give you the money, let's get this thing going. But when it's structured so that you put in people at 1/2 cent, put in some at 2 cents, and then 5 cents, and none of them are significant amounts of money, and none of it was a necessary amount of capital for the company to keep going, it's kind of an artificial distribution. It's set up specifically to meet the listing requirements. If your capital structure was set up in a matter of a couple of weeks or a couple of days just to meet the listing requirements, it's probably not going to work for us. What we want to see is a company that grew. If you grew quickly, that's great. But generally, we're looking for something where we can see capital raised from various sources as the company grew to a point where it was ready to list. Not, as I mentioned earlier, a blueprint that was set up for the company just to be a listed company. Okay, so when we talk about the public distribution, I think somebody asked about the IPO, and it's generally a little larger. We actually only need 150 shareholders, public shareholders. But again, we're looking for shareholders that invested in the company. So ideally, you'll have 150 shareholders that actually paid for the shares in your company, not that received them through others, some other kind of scheme or gift. 500,000 shares have to be owned by those public shareholders, and it has to be at least 10% of the public float. Okay? Or the public float has to be at least 10% of the outstanding shares. So that means that as an entrepreneur, you can keep control of most of the company. If you can get 10%, if you can get the 500,000 shares into the hands of 150 people, you could keep 90%, and that would still qualify for listing. And it's your company, not like an RTO where you may give up a lot of that. Okay. Some new qualifications we've added. And really, these are just things, if you're coming to us, if it's a resource company, you have to have specific objectives, defined period. It's the same thing as having a business plan. It has to be very specific. And that way, in the disclosure, as you're listed, you'll be able to follow up. You'll be able to refer back to the disclosure that you made, keep the shareholders updated. Did we meet these milestones? Why didn't we meet the milestones? What do we need to get back on track? When you make that disclosure in the original disclosure document, you have to follow up. We have monthly progress reports where you'll be able to tell the shareholders what's happening in a kind of informal way. But those are the things, that's for mineral exploration. When we're looking at another company, whether you're offering a product or service, then we're looking more at a very specific business plan. Once you get listed, it's fairly easy to stay listed. Follow the rules, pay the fees, make your filings on time, and pursue your business. We're going to add some requirements really that are exactly about that, pursuing the business. We'll look at the financial statements at the end of the year. Did you spend any money on developing the business? If not, why not? Did you generate revenue? Well, then you're an operating business. We know that something's going on there. What we're trying to avoid is a company that barely meets the listing requirements, gets listed, runs out of money, and doesn't pursue the business. And now we've got a bunch of shareholders wondering, why is that company sitting there? Why is it a listed company? So we raise the bar, try and get them more well-funded before they show up, and then some basic requirements to stay listed. Okay? And that's essentially it for getting listed and staying listed, and where we fit in the process. And I'll join the group over here, so if you have any questions at the end, I'll be up here.